Good morning, and welcome to the Chiefs briefing for the April 21st, 2026 special election. My name is Sean Rogers, and I serve as our election manager here in the Office of Elections. And I want to thank you for joining us this morning and for serving as a chief or an assistant chief in this special election. It's going to be a countywide special election, in fact, a statewide special election. And by all accounts, it seems like it's going to be a pretty large one, or at least a high turnout one. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. For now, I want to welcome you to the Chiefs briefing and mention that I'm pleased to be presenting this on behalf of our electoral board, which consists of the chairman, Catherine Hanley, the vice chairman, Megan Challender, and the secretary, Kevin Pinkney. If you're not already aware, local electoral boards in Virginia are required to consist of a majority of the same representatives of the same party as the governor. So with a three-member electoral board, that's 2 out of 3, and with a new governor in office, we have a new member on the electoral board, and that is Megan Challender. If you've already served with us in one of our special elections recently, this name is not new to you. She's been with us for about 3 months or so at this point. So we want to welcome her to the electoral board and say thank you to Jeff Shapiro, our immediate past member of the electoral board, who's just rolled off of the board. We've also got here with us our general registrar, Eric Spicer, and our deputy general registrar, Cheryl Jones. Eric, do you have anything you want to say while we have all of our chiefs and assistant chiefs here?
Yes, Sean, thank you very much. I just want to tell you all, Sean Rogers is outstanding. That's how we're so successful is we have a fantastic team. Sean and the rest of his team, Arash, who's the election officer manager, and Abigail and all the other staff on that team, and our leadership team for the department, Cheryl Jones, deputy director and general registrar, and Cord at White House, our IT manager. We all work together so effectively, work so hard. And then, of course, the chief and assistant chief officers. We couldn't do it without you, especially those of you. I know some have worked 30 elections or even more than that. But you keep coming back and learning more. That I've been doing this since 1998. And things have gotten more complicated and more technical. We try to keep it simple as much as we can, and little things like the overlay for provisionals that Sean developed. Sean should be very proud of that. We won awards. We won an award for that and for some other things that Sean and the team have done. We try to do everything we can to help you. We're on the front line, and please just, if you're not sure about something, ask. In this election, the important thing will be what you don't say. Of course, don't ever say anything political. This, in some ways, is a contentious election. There could be some confusion. We can't explain anything about we just tell people, look at your brochure. You will have brochures that you can look at or the poster. And Sean's going to get into more of that. But again, I just want to thank you very much for everything that you do.
Thanks for those kind words, Eric. I really appreciate that. And I'm very gratified that we've won national awards for what we've done here for election administration. But more so, I agree with you. I'm very thankful for our chiefs and assistant chiefs being willing to be out there on the front lines of democracy, so to speak. And like you said, there are a lot of important things to keep in mind for this election. We'll get into that in just a moment. For now, I'll introduce our staff that we have here for this briefing. As I mentioned, my name is Sean Rogers. I serve as our election manager. Also on this briefing, we've got Arash Setayeshi, our election officer manager, Gene Tenson, our training and operations specialist, and Steve Wake as well, a member of our training and operations team. We'll be presenting slides here for the next 1 to 2 hours. Hopefully keep this around an hour and a half, depending on questions. If you have questions anytime as we're going along here, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen in Zoom instead of putting them in the chat. We'll be answering them live throughout the briefing as we can get to them, and then we'll also be answering them at the very end. If there are any questions we don't get to, you're always free to send us an email at electionofficers@fairfaxcounty.gov. Moving into the agenda, like I said, we're going to talk about the election that's coming up. So firstly, I'll give an overview of the election itself and things to keep in mind, as well as what's new for this election since November. And then we're going to go into some specifics for things to keep in mind for the timeline before Election Day, as well as reminders and tips for opening the polls during the day, as well, including non-routine and provisional voters. And then going into detail on closing the polls before we finally get to that Q&A. All right. So let's get into it. What is this election? So first, I want to mention that everything you need to know is going to be in the Chief's Notebook. We do a new edition for every election that we have. This is a comprehensive step-by-step for all the procedures that you have in your precinct. You want to go ahead and familiarize yourself with this before Election Day. It's actually posted online right now on our election officer portal, the digital version at portal.electionofficers.com/Chiefs Notebook. And you can pick up a physical copy next week at the Chief Open House. We'll go into more details about that in a few minutes here, but the Chief Open House is going to be next Tuesday at a different location. Rosh will tell you more about that. And signups are available right now in the election officer portal. If you click on training and then on recommended, you can access the Chief Open House signup so you can let us know you're coming. In the notebook are one-page guides for basically every task that you have. There's a number of them for opening the polls. Those are the green ones. The yellow ones for during the day. So task guides to hand out to each station where you have election officers. And then the red closing guides to handle each discrete task that you have to perform while you're closing down your precinct. There's also the purple ones for setup, pre-election day setup, as well as a checklist for the chief for everything to stay on top of during opening and closing. Uh, Generally speaking, you're going to want to follow these checklists. We don't want you to have to think that you have to memorize a ton of stuff. It's a lot of stuff to memorize, and it's been several months since our last election, or it may be your first time serving in this role. That's why we put everything onto these one-page guides so that you have it all in one location, and you can hand it out to your election officers so they can continue on from there. And then if all else fails, you're always free to give us a call. We're also happy to walk through any of these tasks. So now, what is this election? It's a bit of an interesting election. It's an election that's in some respects unprecedented. We haven't had a special election specifically like this before. It is a special election with one choice on the ballot, and that is a proposed amendment to the Constitution of Virginia related to mid-decade redistricting. So, you may have received mailings about this, text messages. I know I certainly have. It seems like it's going to be a high interest election. It's definitely something that inspires a lot of people to have opinions about it, either one way or the other. What I want to mention here is, like Eric alluded to earlier, our role is to administer the election in a nonpartisan manner and provide a space for voters to come out and exercise their voice. Most importantly, we don't want to bias voters or even have the appearance of biasing voters. So there's no change to our expectations. We always expect people to behave in a nonpartisan manner when they're serving as an election officer. But I want to emphasize that here because with just one contest on the ballot, it can be tempting for you or for your election officers to opine on that or say, I like this, I don't like this, or what have you. Those sorts of opinionated conversations or really any partisan conversations in the precinct are strictly prohibited by our code of conduct. And we encourage you to let us know or stay on or advise your election officers about this and remind them to be mindful of the things that they're saying throughout the day and that this isn't a topic of conversation that's permissible in the precinct. Again, because we can't be in the position to influence voters or bias voters in any way. Additionally, this is an election where there are no parties on the ballot. It's just one question, that proposed constitutional amendments. Arash will talk a little bit about this in his section coming up here, but I will mention here, I will affirm that authorized representatives or observers will be allowed in your precinct, and that's the same normal rules that we would have for a general election. We have a very strong interest in being transparent, and so your authorized representative chapter of your Chief's Notebook will cover all of the procedures there about that. And like I mentioned, it's not any change from a general election where observers who represent either of the two major political parties just have to have a letter signed by their party chair, just like in a November election. Additionally, one other thing about a special election to keep in mind is that voters who are currently 17, who are going to be 18 by the next general election, so by this November, are able to vote in special elections. They should register to vote beforehand. If they don't, they would be eligible to do a same-day registration, even though they're not currently 18, so long as they're going to be 18 by the date of the November election later this year. The same applies to primary elections. We'll cover that when we have our Chiefs briefing for the August primary. And if you didn't know, the primary was moved from June to August because of this election here in April. So It's a simple ballot. It's one question, but it's a question that a lot of people might be a little bit confused about. That's why you have brochures and posters to go into detail about this. Like I mentioned, it's not particularly our place to advise voters on how they should vote or what the language of the ballot means. As Eric mentioned, you're going to want to direct them to these brochures. These are standardized statewide, and they go into detail about what the proposed constitutional amendment means in plain language and what a vote yes or a vote no would mean and would entail. This is similar to the explanations for bonds that we have in a lot of November general elections. You'll get 1 to 300 per precinct, which should be one for every 10 voters roughly, depending on how many we expect for your precinct. And you're going to want to refer voters to this brochure if and when they have questions about the ballot. Best practice is to just have your greeter offer this to any voter in line or as they come in to vote if they want an in-depth explanation. Because we don't have an infinite number of these, you're going to want to collect and redistribute them as voters leave the room. They can drop them off by the exit or by the scanner, and then periodically you can bring them back over to the greeter to make sure that they have enough to keep handing out. Additionally, there's going to be a proposed constitutional amendment poster that has the same information as these brochures. Similar to, you'll have it in addition to your sample ballot, but this goes into more detail. You'll have one for each of the 4 languages that we cover in Fairfax County. That's English, Spanish, Vietnamese, and Korean, which is going to take up a lot of wall space because you'll want to post them all together. And the best place to post those is going to be near the entrance or at least in line, so to speak, as voters are getting to the check-in desk. Before they check in to vote, we want to give them the opportunity to review the language of the proposed constitutional amendment, read it over before they go into the voting booth. And the best place for that is going to be if there's a line off to the side of that line or where there would otherwise be a line. That's going to be specific to your individual precinct for what makes the most sense, but that's going to be the place in the room to post that. All right, so talking about the resources that you're going to have for this election, you'll have a similar amount of equipment that you're used to. So 3 to 5 EPBs or e-poll books, 2 ballot marking devices, 2 ballot scanners, and 2 admin tablets. Often we say that you're going to want to, in small elections, you'll have one scanner available and the other scanner turned around. So in case you don't have to use it, that it's quicker to do your paperwork at the end of the day. You may not be able to do that for this election simply because this seems to be like it's going to be a high turnout election. We don't really have a crystal ball as much as we would like one, but it seems like, all signs point to this being a high interest election, and early voting right now is proceeding at about 85%, the rate of early voting that we had for the gubernatorial election. So this whole time we've been planning for this to behave a lot more like a general election than a special election. If you're not aware, we've had 5 special elections in a row here in Fairfax County in December, and then 2 in January, 1 in February, and 1 in March. And it's typical for special elections to have, 5 to 10% turnout on election day. That won't be the case for this special election in April. As such, we've ordered ballots for 55 to 85% of active registered voters based on the size of your precinct and historical turnout trends in your precinct, as well as provisional trends and any other information that we have for each precinct. You'll have 6 to 11 election officers, again, depending on the number of voters in your precinct and trends that we've seen for your specific precinct. Of those election officers, you'll have the chief and the assistant chief, so yourselves, as well as 1 to 2 provisional specialists, except for our very few, couple of our smallest precincts won't have provisional specialists, but almost every precinct will have at least 1 provisional specialist to help with provisionals throughout the day, as well as 2 collector officers or 1 in a co-located precinct. And then from the remainder, all other officers, including language officers, if your precinct has previously identified language needs, or just other officers to fill out that 6 to 11 total election officers. Additionally, the one thing I want to mention is that for this April election, schools will not be in session. So for the roughly 2/3 of our precincts that are in schools, they will not have schools in session that day because it's going to be a high turnout election, perhaps not exceeding the gubernatorial election, although who knows, in some precincts, your turnout might exceed that. But in many ways, approaching a November election, maybe on a medium, roughly the size of our gubernatorial election, or perhaps a little bit smaller if our anything, excuse me, if our early voting numbers are anything to go by. Those schools will be closed on Tuesday, April 21st, for Election Day. They will be open on Monday, April 20th. This may impact your setup a little bit. You're going to want to coordinate with your school contact if you're in one of our schools for the best time to come set up after 3:30 or whenever students are dismissed. Um, at the same time, though, you will be in almost every case, or I believe every case, in your regular room for the polling place. In some schools and some special elections, we have to use a smaller room. That's not going to be the case in this election. If you're used to the cafeteria, for instance, we're going to have you in the cafeteria because, again, it's going to be a large election by all accounts. You can see pictures of this in the election officer portal if you're new as a chief or an assistant chief to get ideas for how to set up or how to lay out your precinct in advance. And you'll want to reach out to your election officers before election day, starting, as soon as you get access to your roster here, to start reaching out to them and introducing yourself. And Arash will talk a lot about that in the before election day expectations. So that's an overview of this election. In this section, I'll talk briefly about what's new since November. And the nice thing is not much, right? When we have back-to-back countywide elections from November to April, and especially when we've had an intervening 5 special elections, we don't like changing too much on you. We don't want to keep things, we don't want to keep you on your toes or keep you guessing. That being said, we've made some small changes that I will mention here, and all of these are reflected in the Chief's notebook. Firstly, the key for the absentee ballot drop box in the provisional bag. The keys for these, it's the same key. They were, because it's the same lock on both. The keys for these were previously in the clear plastic bin in the cage. And based on feedback that we've had from a number of our election officers and a number of our staff, it makes more sense to put them in a centralized location where all of the keys are for the chief and the assistant chief. So we're making that change. We've moved those keys from the clear plastic bin to the lanyard. So you have one on each lanyard so that the chief or the assistant chief can keep track of all those throughout the day without having to worry where those are. So hopefully that's a sensible change, and that'll be easy to accommodate in your precinct. Secondly, we have a new turnout survey. So if you're not already aware, and we'll talk about this in more detail in our overview of the day itself, we typically have done 3 turnout surveys at 9 a.m., noon, and 3 p.m. This election and going forward, we're going to be doing an additional one at 5 p.m. So all you have to do is the same thing you do for the other turnout surveys. Just tell us how many voters you have checked in and who've cast their ballots. This gives us 2 really important pieces of information. One, it's always great to be able to update the public on how the election's going. It's a nice service for us to be able to put out on social media what we're seeing here in Fairfax County for our election day turnout. Helps people make plans for what time they want to go vote or anything like that. Moreover, however, it lets us know here in the office how you're doing out there. Like I said, we ordered ballots, or we are providing you with ballots for 55 to 85% of your active registered voters, but not 100% of your voters. At the size of our county, that would be prohibitively expensive. So we always take a look at trends to see what's a comfortable number of ballots so that we're confident that you won't run out, but not an excessive number. And we don't expect you to run out of ballots ever. That's why we order the amount that we order. But as I mentioned, in this election, it's hard to predict turnout. So while we believe we've definitely ordered enough ballots for you to account for all of your check-ins, all of your voters casting their ballots normally, as well as provisional ballots, spoiled and voided ballots, wherever those occur, your turnout survey lets us know what you're actually using in the precinct so we can make any decisions if we need to bring out additional ballots if we have to. So that 5 p.m. turnout survey is going to be useful information for us to help make sure that you're doing okay out there. You'll get a reminder before each turnout survey, and you, the chief or assistant chief, or any election officer can take either of your 2 admin tablets and just very quickly provide that number to us. This is a change that we've made for one of our recent special elections, but it's the first time we've done it in a large countywide election. We've made some changes over the past couple of years about where we do election officer evaluations. In the past, just for frame of reference, this used to be a physical sheet of paper that you would have to fill out on election day, as it was fresh in your mind. Then we transitioned that to be a digital form that you would fill out on election day as it was fresh in your mind. But the problem with both of those is that election day is pretty busy, especially in a high turnout election. There is, of course, value in recording information about your election officers as you see it, but we already give you a spot to tell us all of your feedback about election day, and that's in the post-election survey. So we've incorporated info about your or evaluations of your election officers, good or bad, into the post-election survey. You'll be able to tell us individualized uh, feedback about your election officers while it's still fresh in your mind. You'll get the link to the survey the day after the election. And as always, we encourage you to fill that out as soon as you can, get it out of the way, and you'll now be able to tell us about your election officers in there. Of course, you have your physical chief's notes in your precinct, and we would always encourage you to fill those out throughout the day for anything notable. This spot for the evaluations in the post-election survey just replaces the paper form and then the digital form that we used to have. So it puts everything in a perhaps a neater spot for you to do, and that'll be a nice change going forward. Additionally, and again, this was a change that was in place for our most recent March election, but this is our first countywide election. The what ifs have been updated by the Virginia Department of Elections. Just as a reminder, the what ifs are a full set of over 20 comprehensive how-tos for non-routine voter situations or other situations. We put these in our chief's notebook printed on yellow paper as kind of the ultimate explanation for what to do in any specific scenario. It sounds, when I say the what ifs have been updated, that sounds, intimidating. Well, what's going on in there? I want to clarify that there's no procedural change to any specific scenario. Everything is exactly the same, but statewide, the Department of Elections has updated mostly the numbering. So some previous what ifs that were certain numbers are now a different number. What if number 9 has become what if number 10, but it's still an explanation for federal only voters. What if number 19 has become what if number 16, I believe, but it's still the same explanation for what to do with voters who have an absentee status. So again, no procedures have changed, but there's been some more context provided for some what ifs. There were some situations that were part of another what if that have been created as their own what if. But we've renumbered our what ifs in the that we print into the Chief's notebook to match this updated numbering by the Department of Elections. So again, just refer to the table of contents, or if you're going from a poll pad or an EPP prompt that tells you where to refer to in the what ifs, just flip to that page because the content hasn't changed. It's just the numbering. And one other change, just for this election, we won't be providing large wall maps of Fairfax County. Ordinarily, we'll provide a large wall map for at least one of the districts on the ballot. So in a Senate contest, we'll provide a map of the Senate districts, or in a congressional contest, we'll provide the congressional districts, and so on, as a nice service to people in the precincts so they can see that. We're not going to be doing that for this election and just this election for a number of reasons. Mostly, it can lead to voters being confused. If we provide the current congressional district maps, voters may wonder, are these the maps that we're voting on today? And the answer is no. The question on the ballot isn't actually voting on maps; it's voting on the option to redistrict, which is a little bit of a nuance. The maps that you may have seen promulgated by the General Assembly are proposed maps, but they're not actually directly connected to the question on the ballot on April 21st. Additionally, we don't want to suggest, even tacitly, a preference for any map. Our office takes no position on this ballot issue. And so if we were to post, say, the current congressional districts, it could be interpreted by a voter in the room as, well, we prefer these maps. Or if we post the proposed maps, it could be interpreted that way. So just to keep things entirely above board, we won't be providing these maps, so there's no misinterpretation that can happen in the precinct. We will provide, if you're a co-located precinct, we will provide maps of both of your precincts. That hasn't changed. But this large wall map of Fairfax County isn't something we'll be providing in this election. However, I do want to mention a digital map on the admin tablet. The precinct and address lookup tool has the full county on there. If you ever need to look up a voter, that's going to be your first place to go anyway to type in their address. so you can see what precinct they're in. So small change, but just don't be looking for this. It won't be in your kit. And finally, this is the first countywide election with our new updated policy for chief assignments, chief and assistant chief assignments from the electoral board. They changed this. So just for frame of reference, under Virginia law, chiefs and assistant chiefs must be affiliated with opposite political parties. That hasn't changed. That's always been true, and that's going to remain true. What has changed is that in the past, the electoral board had also required that all of our chiefs be of the same party of the sitting governor. Um, so for the past several years, all of our chiefs have been Republican affiliated, and before that, Democratic affiliated, and so on. In February, the Electoral Board revised this policy to be a little bit more flexible. So going forward, similar to the composition of the board itself, at least two-thirds of our chiefs will be of the same party of the sitting governor, with the remainder being of the other major political party. So with a new Democratic governor in office, that'll be at least two-thirds of our chiefs will be Democratic affiliated, and our assistant chief, and sorry, the remainder of our chiefs will be Republican affiliated. And again, in each precinct, the chief and the assistant chief will be of opposite political parties. Uh, the electoral board also has the policy where chiefs must have served at least once as an assistant chief in Fairfax County, and then a couple more specifics just to make sure that everything is straightforward. So if you are a this, you may have picked up on this after you received your assignment. If you're, say, a Republican affiliated election officer who wasn't expecting to be able to be a chief under this new policy, a minority of our election officers will be of that political party. So you may be a Republican affiliated officer as serving as a chief on this call, or you may have uh, you may have stepped up from an assistant chief to be a chief if you're a Democratic affiliated officer, or any combination there. So don't be surprised by that. That's our new policy for we had in place starting in February, but going forward, that is our policy in the county. And as always, we thank you for serving as a chief or an assistant chief. We really value your experience and expertise, especially because in a lot of cases, you know your precinct, you know the specifics of your precinct, and a lot of the important information to know there. So that's an update. That's just that doesn't affect any conduct in the precinct, but it's good context to be aware of for our assignments and who may be serving as a chief or an assistant chief across the county. So we talked a lot about what's new and things about this specific election. I'm going to turn it on over to Arash here, who's going to talk about the timeline for the next 3 weeks going into Election Day and things to be aware of. And then we'll talk about Election Day itself and our reminders for that. Arash?
Thanks, Sean. Good morning, everyone. It's good to see everybody. Some of you we haven't seen since November. Some of you we just saw you a month ago. So it's good to see everyone, and some of you are new. So welcome. So we'll get started with what we're going to be doing between now and Election Day. If there's one thing to take away from my section here, it's to make sure that this email address and this phone number are whitelisted in your inbox and saved in your phone. This is going to be the main way we're going to be reaching out to you with any pre-election notifications, any updates. You're also going to be getting emails from us related to any changes in your roster or anything leading up to your pre-election tasks. So we don't want you to miss any of these. So please just make sure to save these in your inbox and phone. One thing you will see in the portal is your pre-election checklist. This is going to be familiar to a lot of you from November. I know during a lot of the smaller special elections, we weren't using these as consistently, but this is for your use to keep track of what your tasks are and their deadlines. Please just make sure we've consolidated all of this into the portal. The Chiefs page will be live by the end of this briefing. And this is going to be your best way to keep track, and for your rovers to also make sure that you are on track so that all of your pre-election preparations are on schedule and on track. Just as a reminder, there are going to be a few of these tasks that are going to be due. So just know that a couple dates that are coming up. Friday, April 10th. So we're looking at about a week from this Friday. is going to be your deadline to have contacted your polling place contact, and also your roster. We would like for that to have been done sooner rather than later, especially with the polling place contact, because it may take them a couple days to get back to you. We also have set a soft deadline for the pickup of your supplies and your setup of your polling place, to be done by also Friday the 10th. We also do understand sometimes it's easier to do that once you have visited your polling place. So please note that in some cases you'll see that the deadline is listed as the 17th. That's the hard deadline, but we would like people not to wait until that day to have selected their supply pickup and precinct setup times, just due to the logistics of getting everything ready in your depots. The other thing also to contact your roster sooner rather than later is to make sure to be prepared for your Monday setup. We don't want you obviously to be doing that by yourself, but also for your roster to be in the loop for everything leading up to election day. It's also important for you to be checking your roster regularly. There may be some drop-offs, there may be some changes. So just keep that in mind as someone may be assigned after you've reached out to everyone in your mass email that may need to be caught up. And we would rather not be a couple days before the election when they've been sitting there wondering. They also will be notified a week before the election of who their chiefs and assistant chiefs are so that they can reach out to you. But we hope that by then they will already heard from you. All right. One main thing that should not be new to anyone is when you have selected your depot and also obviously your pickup time and your setup time, there should not be anything more than about an hour gap between those two times because you need to be going straight from the depot to your polling place to set up. For schools, like was already covered by Sean, and schools will be open on Monday the 20th, so please make sure when you're contacting your facility contact, you are ensuring that your voting room will be accessible as normal or as needed. If you find out that there's some sort of event or some sort of thing going on that may delay your access to that room, we need to know about it as soon as possible. But all of the surveys we sent out and all the responses we've gotten from our polling place contacts should have already provided you with as much of that info as possible. As a reminder, we are having the Chief Open House a week from today. This will be at our warehouse in Springfield. We'll be sharing more information about it in terms of address and logistics a little bit later following this briefing. But this will be on Tuesday the 7th from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. It is a scheduled but drop-in event. You schedule a time slot to come in so that we don't have 500 people show up at the same time. But you're allowed to wander and spend as much time as you would like going through the different stations. Those of you who have not been to an open house before, this is essentially not just an opportunity to pick up your physical notebook before Monday the 20th, but it is an opportunity to be able to see a lot of the equipment hands-on you may not have seen since one of your training classes. If you have taken one of the workshops already, or you will be taking one of the workshops, you will be getting a much more focused opportunity to work on things like closing procedures or provisional or chief related matters. The open house kind of gives you a nice overview of everything. You get to see the cages, you get to play around with the e-poll book a little bit. You get to ask us some questions. We'll even have some of our team there walking you through some of the things with the portal if you have any questions. So it's highly recommended, not just for the notebook, but it really does benefit people who have shown up to kind of get a little bit of a dry run before election day. And please just make sure no open toe shoes, because it'll be in a warehouse and everyone will be provided a safety vest. And obviously, aside from the other chapters in your notebook, we asked you to review chapters 14 and 15. These are always important to review and know where to look in case of an emergency. You will be the main source of the point of contact, really. We tell every election officer at training, if you have any questions, ask your chief. So you knowing where to look and what to look for is going to cut down on the response time. Obviously, if we need to be looped in, that's great. But you're the first line of response. So please just make sure to be aware of what to look for, and especially with evacuation procedures, that your team is also briefed on that as well. So now we are at election day. We are opening the polls. Everyone is there at 5 a.m. Everyone is getting sworn in. Please remember that when you have set up your precinct the day before, you are not opening the orange pouch. The orange pouch is where you will be finding your equipment keys, your password card, your voter permit cards. This should not be opened until election morning. So just remember that. But that's also where you're going to find all those things on election morning. So it's election morning. Everyone's been sworn in. Hopefully, everyone's there on time. You must set up both of your ballot scanners. Even if your precinct is maybe not expecting a high turnout, in this election, that's probably not going to be the case. But regardless, you must still open both scanners, and they both must be pressed. You must be pressing the go to voting mode button at 6 a.m. on both of them. Now, if you choose to turn one of them around, put it off to the side until maybe the volume increases for you to need to use it, that's fine. But they both must still have been opened and prepared for being used. This is also useful because if one of your scanners, let's say, jams or has an issue, you have another one right there, and you shouldn't have any interruptions to the voting process while you contact your rover or our office to get that troubleshooted. You should be able to still continue to keep going. As we've heard from a lot of you at our ballot marking device, either trainings or modules, many of you have only maybe seen that be used once. Just as a reminder, this is an accessibility device. This is essentially a very accessible pen and paper for people to mark their ballots. We want to make sure that this is not only set up and prepared, but it's also in an accessible location. So please keep that in mind when you're setting up your precincts the day before, and that it is also one of the equipment that your team is setting up on election. As I discussed earlier, in terms of evacuations in Chapter 15, in the morning of, please make sure to review these procedures with your team. You're going to be obviously letting them know that depending on what position they're in at the time of an emergency, what their responsibilities will be. Some people will be to gather certain materials. Some people will be to make sure of certain things that they have in their possession. So everyone knowing about that is going to be best. And obviously, you're going to be designating a location outside for evacuations. So everyone just needs to be on the same page about this. So just make sure of that. The other thing also is that in the morning, if someone hasn't shown up yet as of the 5 a.m. Swearing in and the oath, please wait until after 5:30 to notify our office because by then we will be able to then dispatch someone as a reserve. After 5:30 is when we're going to be triaging and getting reserves sent to where they are. And we also ask if there's any equipment or any issues that you may have in the morning that aren't, urgent to your voting procedure, such as if you don't feel like you have enough envelope or folders, you don't feel like you may have enough certain things. Please also save those calls for a little after everything is set up in the morning so that we can continue to triage getting reserves sent out where they need to be and also any equipment emergencies that may happen. But other than that, we should hopefully hope for everyone to have a nice, smooth morning. In the event that you need to contact our office, on the inside cover of your Chief notebook, you will have three numbers that you can contact for anything you need. Just as an overview, there's the general support number. Please call us by 5:30 if any officers have not yet arrived. Also, if there's any questions about procedures or policies, please also make sure to call our general support number. If it is a specific question about a voter registration issues, an SDR or provisional question, there's a question in the Q&A about if someone has a voter being challenged, something like that. The voter support number and Bushra's team are going to be there for you to help you with that. We have had a couple calls come in through the main support number, and we just have to transfer it just to save you time. Please make sure you're calling the voter support number with voter related questions. And obviously, any technical equipment issues, your first call should be to the tech support number, not your rover, because if the tech support is able to walk you through something, they will do that right away. But if they need to triage and dispatch your rover, they will do that. Your rover is going to be potentially on the road. They're going to be potentially at another precinct helping with something. and may not be your most immediate response. So please keep these three numbers in mind, maybe even save them into your phone, let your assistant chief know. These are the three things. Another thing just to kind of mention is if you're calling any one of these numbers, please make sure also to note it in your chief notes. If you're having to call us for something, it might be an important thing for us to know later on that it was an issue that came up. So please make sure to also reflect that in your chief notes, just a little quick little bit that you called at what time. Now we're during the day, and it's been a few hours into the day. Um, as Sean had mentioned, we normally already were doing the 9 a.m., 12 p.m., and 3 p.m. Turnout surveys. This not only gives us kind of a finger on the pulse of how everyone's doing in terms of turnout, but it's also very important for us to know in terms of ballots. And if anyone is running low on anything, we can get that sent out to you, which is why now the 5 p.m. one has also been added. So we're 2 hours away from polls closing. Um, Please also note that because these are being sent out to every chief and assistant chief, the way that the system is being set up, we do have to start a little bit earlier than these check-in times with the text messages. So if you get your text message maybe 15 minutes beforehand, please still send it in by like 9 a.m., 12, 3, or 5. But we also don't want to wait until a few minutes before and have some people not get their reminder until like 9:20 when it's too late for that. So just see the reminder as just that, a reminder. But we know you're going to be busy during the day, so we're doing everything we can to help support you to have a great day. This is also something that's worth maybe taking another look at and reminding yourself of who is allowed inside the polling place and what level of their access they may have. It's going to be in chapter one. I think it's page 1.6 of your chief notebook. So it's right at the beginning. As a reminder, there's no candidates on this ballot. So the section for candidates will not necessarily be relevant. There's not going to be any candidates showing up to your polling place. However, authorized representatives of a party may. And as Sean has already mentioned, as long as they have the requisite letter, they will have access to your polling place and call us with any follow-up questions or any concerns. Media, just a reminder, does have access to come in, but there's certain areas that they can, and there's only certain amount of footage that they're able to get, such as B-rolls, not anything inside the polling place of particular people voting, that sort of thing. So just refer to that page and always, obviously, give us a call with any questions you may have. That's what we're here for. And again, in terms of triaging in case of any emergencies, if there's immediate assistance required, if there's a medical emergency, please don't delay, call 911. Take care of that. Make sure everything is being addressed and handled as best as possible, while then following up with us and letting us know. We'd rather know about that once everything is taken care of and everything is stabilized, rather than finding out about it in your chief notes or from your rover later in the day. Now, if it's something that is requiring urgent response from our office, then obviously call our number. Or if you want to update us on something previously, please call our number. And again, if you have to do either one of these things, call either one of these numbers for an emergency. Please make sure also to indicate it in your chief notes. And in the possibility that there's a medical emergency, just a reminder, the medical incident report form is going to need to be filled out. Preferably, this is something prior to that individual leaving. We just want to be able to follow up with them afterwards, make sure everything is okay. You'll find this in the red emergency envelope. This is something that could be applicable to a voter, an election officer, someone inside your polling place, within the 40-foot line. Um, you know, the most common use of this has been in the instances where if you haven't checked ahead of time and you did not end up with your appropriate number of tables and chairs, so you're having to use like the little tiny chairs in an elementary school, and there was a fall resulting in one of those. That's what this would be used for. We have fortunately not had that happen. Everyone's been amazing about keeping up with their polling place contacts to ensure they have all of the equipment required for their voters. So thank you for that. But there are other instances where you may need to be using this form, and so please know where it is in case you do. And with that, my section's over. I'm going to kick it over back to Gene, I believe, to talk about non-routine and provisional voters. Oh, or it could be Sean, actually. Sean, is it you?
Thanks, Arash. That one is me,
Yeah.
actually.
All right, great.
So we're still during the day talking about non-routine and provisional voters here. There's no easy way to predict, like I mentioned earlier, exactly how many non-routine or provisional voters you might have, but it's fair to presume it might be similar to a November election. So the one thing that I want to stress is that we really want to set you up for success. That's why we provide a lot of resources to help you get to the best determination or the right answer for every voter for whatever the way that they need to vote is, depending on their situation. So, firstly, we have, as we talked about, the what ifs in your Chief's notebook. Those are printed on yellow paper. Those are in the chapter for non-routine and what ifs. That chapter also outlines a number of common non-routine situations and what the action to take is and where you can go for more information or more details to refer to for more problem solving. Additionally, it has the text for every ePollbook prompt, uh, plain text there in your notebook, so you don't have to wait for it to show up. For any voter who's in that situation, you can read in advance if you like. What the action that you would take is for, let's say, an inactive voter or a voter who's on confirmation mailing or a voter who has an absentee ballot issued and they either have it with them or they don't have it with them. Your Chief's notebook has sort of the full A to Z. What do you do? What if this? What if that? Those are all listed out there. For any voter who has a prompt on the EPB, so they have some sort of status, like I said, inactive, confirmation mailing, they have some sort of absentee status. Maybe they're marked as overseas. Any sort of e-poll book prompt. The prompt itself will tell you what to do and provide you a brief explanation of what the voter's situation is. So you can see in this example, for an absentee pre-processed voter, that means they've already returned their voted absentee by mail ballot and we've pre-processed it. In this situation, it means this voter has already voted. So the only option that they have is a provisional ballot. And you can see we say reason code number 5, and that reason is the voter has already voted. It's the only option that this voter can be offered. It tells you which section to use on the voter referral worksheet to help you arrive at this answer and where more information is in the what ifs. And ultimately, for any situation that you're unfamiliar with, that you want us to look something up for, or that you just need some extra guidance for, you can call the Office of Elections, and we have plenty of staff here who are happy to help you with any particular voter situation. The voter referral worksheet is a one-stop shop to help you with non-routine voter situations that are likely to become a provisional. And it's required for those provisional situations because it helps you get to the correct determination for those voters, and it has a checklist on the back for your provisional specialist, you or your provisional specialist, to fill out to make sure all the steps of the process are being followed. That's kind of a hard category to define. That's why I'll mention the specific scenarios that are outlined on this worksheet. That is, namely, a voter has an absentee status marked on the poll book, one of those red statuses, and then you go through if they have their ballot or not. Voter is marked as already voted. A voter is not on your e-poll book at all, or they've moved from the address that you see on the e-poll book. A voter comes into the check-in desk and they give a new address, and it's not what you see in the e-poll book. In those situations, you might be doing an SDR if they live in your precinct, or you might have to jump in to evaluate the moving conditions to see what options that voter has. This gives you a spot to write down information that you're going to need to make that determination, namely the voters, or specifically the voter's address and the precincts and congressional districts that correspond to it, so you can work through the moving conditions. We saw a lot of chiefs over time create their own kind of worksheets to track this sort of information. So we want to put it in one spot so you can write down any of that ancillary information that you need for voters, especially when they've moved or they're not registered at all. And then finally, the last section is for if you're unsure. Section D, it's sort of a free space or a blank space. If you just need to write something down, you need to write down what we told you over the phone, or you've called our office because you're not 100% sure with any given scenario. This is a spot where you can kind of record that for your, when it's helpful for your purposes. Moving on to the parts of the voter referral worksheet. Again, there's that front step, which is really sort of a decision workflow or a decision kind of matrix. So you can work through, a voter is in this situation. Here's the question I have to ask of them, and here's how I can get to what's the determination to give to them. And again, this collects or condenses several other pieces of information that's in other locations. So if you were to go to the what ifs, you would get to the same answer as if you're following this worksheet or the poll pad, the EPB prompts or anything like that. the front side of the voter referral worksheet and the first section of the backside are for the chief or the assistant chief, whoever is determining the voter's eligibility, to complete so they can arrive at that determination. And then the first section of the backside is to tee up your provisional specialist for what is the reason that this voter is voting provisionally. So as you're working with the voter to determine what option you can provide them, you'll fill out this section and ask them the questions that you need to ask them. And then when you hand it over to your provisional specialist, who should be at the provisional table nearby the chief's table, they can take it from there with this backside. They'll know which section they need to mark on the provisional envelope, and they'll jump into that checklist to make sure that they're doing everything they need to do during that provisional to help that provisional voter. One thing I will mention with the voter referral worksheet, a very minor discrepancy. Like I mentioned, we have renumbered what ifs that the Department of Elections updated some of the numbering on them. So there is in section A a minor reference to what if number 19, which is now what if number 16. And so we'll be reprinting these later this year, but we don't want to wastefully waste a lot of the paper that we've already printed. It's the one reference on the voter referral worksheet that references a what if number, and unfortunately, because they got changed, it's out of date. It doesn't affect any of the decision making on this sheet, but it's something that I'll mention before you notice it. We're aware, and later this year we'll have that corrected and updated. On the backside, after you as the chief or assistant chief have made your determination and let the provisional specialist know if indeed that voter is voting provisionally, what reason they're voting, this is when you hand it off to the provisional specialist. If you're in a small precinct, it's going to be you as the chief or assistant chief. In this large election, almost every precinct will have a provisional specialist, and many precincts will have two. In our recent special elections, it was just the chief or the assistant chief. So if you've served with us in one of those, you'll have some practice with all of these steps. The provisional specialist is helping with some of the more, you could say maybe administrative parts of the process. They're helping the voter from from the moment they sit down to vote their provisional ballot, getting the ballots, filling out the provisional envelope, including what's required on that envelope, checking that they've completed everything correctly, having someone double check that, and entering it into the provisional log on the admin tablet, providing the voter with the required notice and their I voted sticker. If the voter is not voting provisionally, of course, you don't continue with this section. But in the case where you do continue with a provisional voter, this sets your provisional specialist up for success so they can continue through the checklist and make sure we've hit every point with each voter. That's an overview of this tool that we provide for you. I want to talk about some common non-routine situations and some pitfalls to be on the lookout for. What we see most commonly, especially in high turnout elections, is our most common provisional situation is a same-day registration. This is a voter who has moved, or they're not on the poll book. They're not registered to vote, or they have not updated their registration to their current address. If you're not aware, before every election, there's something that is called the close of books. Essentially, no updates to your registration can be made a certain period before the election. You have a certain time frame that you have to get that updated in. So, for example, if I make a change to my registration, I go to the DMV 2 days before the election, it won't be reflected in that election because it was after the close of books. A lot of people don't realize this, and they go to register to vote, and they don't realize they've done it too late to make the change in time for the election. But that's what SDR is for, same-day registration. The one thing I want to mention most specifically here is that an SDR has to be performed in the precinct where the voter lives. So that's why you have the precinct and address lookup app on your admin tablet, so you can type in the voter's address and find out what precinct corresponds to their address and confirm that it's your precinct. Again, you'll be determining, has the voter arrived at the correct precinct to do an SDR? So as you're making that determination, remember it has to be the precinct where they live for them to proceed with an SDR. They can't just go to any precinct, right? The other thing that we see pretty commonly is when a voter has brought their absentee ballot with them. A lot of voters, that's the nice thing is you get to decide how you want to vote in Fairfax County. You can vote early in person, by mail, or in person on election day. If you choose to vote by mail and we mail you out an absentee ballot, to vote normally in your precinct, you just have to exchange that ballot or surrender it so that you can vote normally or on machine in your precinct. That's something that a lot of voters choose to do, and they're perfectly permitted to do that. They just have to surrender it so they can vote normally in the precinct. It's something we see a lot of voters do, and you'll probably see that on election day. Of course, if they didn't have their ballot with them, they would have to vote a provisional for not having their absentee ballot. And the voter referral worksheet and all of the resources that we provide to you will cover this step by step. Um, Another thing I want to mention about the provisional envelope itself is that it has two sides, right? So there's one side for same-day registrations, and there's another side for all other provisional reasons. So those absentee reasons, or say the voter is marked as already voted, or anything like that, you use the other side. For an SDR, you use that SDR side. And that's important because these sides have different pieces of information that they request of the voter. The SDR side is requesting all of the required elements to register to vote. It's very similar to a voter registration application. So when you tell your provisional specialist what the reason is for the voter voting provisionally, make sure that they're aware that they're going to provide the SDR side for for a same-day registration, and anything else, it's going to be that other side. Additionally, we want to make sure that every voter has the best chance of their ballot being counted, and that includes making sure they filled out all required pieces of information on the provisional ballot. Eric talked a little bit about this earlier, and we have what we call provisional overlays. So you can see these filled in provisional ballot envelopes are kind of hard to read, especially if that ink were black and not blue. It would all sort of blend together, and it's hard to see where are the asterisks, what is the required information. We provide a plastic um, uh, sort of templates that you can place over top of the provisional ballot envelopes after it's been completed by you and the voter, just like this, to kind of hide out a lot of that visual noise so that the provisional specialist and whoever is performing the double check, whether that's you, the chief, the assistant chief, or another officer, has an easy at-a-glance way to check that everything's been filled out, both in the bottom left and in the top right, where there's a section for the provisional specialist, and all of the required pieces from the voter. If there's anything that looks like it's amiss, you'll have to remove it and double check that the voters provided that piece of information. And we'll talk about this in just a second. Like Eric said, this is something we won an award for at a national level, and it's a great service to be able to provide to you. Hopefully it helps make it just a little bit easier. We know election day is got a lot going on, right? And anything we can do to make your day go a little bit smoother, that's what we're all about. On the SDR itself, or on an SDR side of a provisional ballot envelope, I want to call out a specific section that can throw people for a loop sometimes. Generally speaking, checkboxes are easier to miss than information that you have to fill out, right? Because as you're just scanning along, sometimes you can skip past something. And question 3 is sort of a compound question on the SDR application. It asks, have you been convicted of a felony or judged mentally incapacitated and disqualified to vote? Yes or no? If the voter answers yes, they have to answer an additional question as to whether or not that right has been restored. The voter should answer this question truthfully for whatever their situation is, but they may miss this question, or they may say, if they mark no, then no further answer is needed. If they mark yes, then they have to provide the answer to that second question. The provisional ballot overlay just highlights that first no because it's what we see as the most common answer. But if you see that it's not checked and you take it off, you or your provisional specialist will take a closer look to make sure the voter has offered a complete answer to this question. One other mistake I want to call out, and this is more so on the other side of the equation, is that issuing a provisional for reason number 6 is rare, or should be rare at least. Reason number 6 is other, but that other, I don't want to encourage you to think of that as a catch-all, because oftentimes when we see a provisional reason number 6 come through, it could have been a different provisional reason. It could have been an SDR, in which case you should have filled out the other side of the provisional envelope, the SDR side, or another reason. If you have any confusion or any provisionals that don't kind of easily fit into one of these situations, please give us a call. You can call the voter services line at the Office of Elections, and they're happy to look up any information that they need to. They have access to voter records that you might not have access, you definitely don't have access to in the precinct, and they can help you with any voter's specific situation. Really, if you're going to proceed with a reason code number 6, give us a call so we can help you confirm that you're on the right track, because as I mentioned, while it is an option on the envelope, it is quite rare. I will say that the provisional log does have a spot for you to mention, if and when a voter insists on voting in the wrong precinct. Like I mentioned, it's your duty to make sure that the voter is in the right precinct to do a provisional, to do an SDR. I'm sorry, and that's going to be the precinct where the voter lives, if they're doing an SDR, that is. So be on the lookout for a couple of those common situations, enough for us to mention. Now, once a provisional has been completed, this is something that we rolled out after so last year in 2025. There is a spot to put all of the provisionals that your provisional specialist is going to be inserting them into this green provisional bag. Green for provisionals, just like the envelope. As the start of the day, you'll open this up and seal it. And then throughout the day, the provisional specialist will be inserting the completed and sealed provisional ballot envelopes with the voted provisional ballots inside of them into this bag. Now, it's important to note that you can't get back into this bag until the polls close at 7. So your provisional specialist is going to want to make sure that they've entered each one of these into the provisional log on the admin tablet before they put it into this bag. I find the easiest way to do that is to make a small, unobtrusive check mark in the top right corner next to the precinct, just as a visual reminder for yourself. But whatever works for you or your provisional specialist, so you can make sure that it's okay to go ahead and insert this into the bag where it's going to stay for the rest of the day. Gene will talk later on about what you do with them at the end of the day, but during the day, they all go into this provisional bag, SDR and non-SDR, whichever the reason, they'll both go into here. So that was a lot of information. We mostly just wanted to highlight a lot of the resources that we have available to you and give you some reminders, especially if it's been a while since you've served or if it's your first time serving as a chief or an assistant chief. We do have some workshops coming up if you want to review some of these, especially for non-routine voters. If you want to sign up for a chief workshop, those are available in the election officer portal, or we're happy to go more into detail on these or any other topic during the chief open house next week on Tuesday. For now, I'm going to turn it on over to Gene, who's going to talk about things to keep in mind while you're closing the polls. Gene?
Thanks, Sean. Well, it's finally 7 o'clock. You've made it through the day, and hopefully it's been a smooth one with no challenge that you were not able to handle with our support. Get a drink of water, take some deep breaths, slow down. You've got this, and we've got your back, and we are only a phone call away. That's something that we hope that you'll remember all day, throughout the day, that this office is ready to help you with whatever may come up. So, as you're getting ready for closing, really you're going to start thinking about this in the afternoon. You're going to be planning out who's going to do what. And something that we have found helpful is pass out the closing guides to your election officers so that they have a chance to read those over. You can go over any questions they might have. Let them get familiar with what they're going to be doing at 7 o'clock. The first up task is going to be closing the ballot scanners, especially with a larger election like we expect this one to be versus a small special or something like that, is always close the scanner with the highest public count first. That way, if something goes wrong when you're closing the first scanner, you have that second one as a backup. This is really important because if something goes wrong, you're going to be there a while dealing with that particular issue. You've already been there long enough since 5 a.m. The collector officers will be waiting on those USB flash drives, but just let them hang out. They'll be fine. Important tip about closing your scanners is never pull those flash drives until the scanner is completely shut down. Wait for the screen to go dark, completely black, and let that power light next to the primary USB drive go completely out. Then and only then is it safe to pull those flash drives out. If you pull them too soon, then it's just like if you crash the hard drive of your computer, for those who remember doing such things, not fun. And if you have any machine issues with equipment during closing or at any time during the day, call tech support. It's in the inside cover of your Chief's notebook, like all of our phone numbers. They will walk you through the correct steps for this situation that you've encountered. The flash drives have to be put in the right place. And we've made this easy for you by color coding everything as we like to do. So the purple drives go in the purple pouch, the white drives go in the white envelope, number 7, and That way you can't mess this up as long as you can see the colors. Then if you can't, it's even labeled. It says on the purple ones, the words purple pouch, and the white ones actually say number 7 envelope. So there shouldn't be any reason why you can't get these in the right place. This is part of your chief checklist. Yes, you, the chief, have your own checklist as part of closing, and it's in the closing chapter of your notebook. Alrighty. Now, as part of the closing, your provisional officer is going to be shutting down their table. They're going to be packing up the envelopes, and they're going to follow a closing guide just like everybody else, sorting the envelopes into an SDR pile and a non-SDR pile. And independently, 2 people are going to count the number of envelopes in each pile. These are all going to go into the appropriate 1A envelope. This question comes up every election. Do we return 1A envelopes even if they're empty? And the answer is yes. Always return an envelope even if it's empty. Go ahead and seal it just like the way you would if there were things inside, because by doing that, you're affirmatively letting us know there was nothing there. We won't wonder, oh, did you leave that envelope at the precinct or in the kit or something like that. The collector officers are going to take 3 kinds of things with them back to the government center. There will be 1A envelopes, there will be a purple pouch, and there will be a trip lock security bag containing the Dropbox ballots. A little trick that happens every election is remind the collector officer to tear the strip off of that clear trip lock bag before they seal it. Otherwise, it gets a little messy. Call us if they get it wrong, but it's not the end of the world. But just tell them to please tear it off before they seal it. If you are sharing a Dropbox in a co-located precinct situation, there will be one trip lock bag that has ballots in it, or excuse me, absentee Dropbox envelopes in it, and then one trip lock bag that doesn't. You're still going to return both, just like with the 1As. You're going to return that empty trip lock, and the form inside is going to have 0, no Dropbox ballots. That way we know all the Dropbox ballots are in the other precinct's envelope. So in a co-located situation, the collector officers would have double of everything. They would have 4 green envelopes, 2 purple pouches, and 2 trip locks. Packing the e-poll books is something that we're still getting a little used to. We've had these for a few elections now. So for those of us like me who are not visually oriented people or spatially oriented, we've got a nice little packing guide to show you which things go where in that big case, because everything is designed to hold the specific pieces just a certain way. It does help if you kind of pack things toward the center of the case, just distributes the weight into the middle. Excuse me, it concentrates the weight into the middle, and that way it's just a little easier for you to pick up. A little tip about packing your ballot marking devices, by the way. Sometimes we get them back where they are in the case upside down or with the screen facing backwards. Just like the e-poll book's closing guide, the ballot marking device also has a closing guide, and it shows how to pack this device the right way. Most important document of the day, your statement of results. Those who have been serving with us for many elections may remember the old days when the SOR was enormous, and it was even multiple pages in some big elections. We keep simplifying this, and we now have this down to the point where it's almost impossible to do your SOR wrong. If you've got a closing numbers worksheet that is completely filled out, you've got everything you need to do your SOR. You've got a tool now on your admin tablet. This is a required step, by the way. Plug everything in to the SOR helper on the admin tablet. It walks you through each step of the SOR. You just plug in the numbers from the closing numbers worksheet. And then at the end, it's going to show you an image of the completely filled out SOR. But you're not done. That's just an image of it. You still need to copy the numbers from the SOR you see on the screen on the admin tablet to the physical 2 copies of the SOR, front and back. Even with the SOR helper, most elections, there's probably one precinct that returns a blank SOR. Please don't be that precinct, okay? We'd appreciate that. And do remember that everybody who is present in closing needs to sign that SOR. Little help, you can really help out our voting equipment team. These folks work for months before each election, getting all of your supplies ready and packing these cages. And then these things come back on the truck. And sometimes they've been packed not so well. There is a packing guide for the gray cage to show you what goes where. Space is pretty tight in that thing. So it's not only getting it all into the cage, but packing it safely. So in this, you see the red arrow, there are yard sign, the metal things are sticking out. And that could be extremely hazardous to the people who are loading and unloading the cages. If you pack it according to the guide, you're going to leave the signs on the frames and everything's going to be good. Some folks have a little trouble getting their cage locked. Those doors can get kind of out of alignment at times. So part of getting that thing locked correctly is getting the slide bolt engaged at the top and at the bottom. There's one at the top and the bottom. Once those are engaged, then you'll be able to lock them at the top and the bottom. It's very important to get it locked because if the bolt isn't engaged, even if it's locked, you can see that the doors can open during transport. And that blue bag is actually starting to fall out. So again, it creates a hazardous situation that we would like to avoid. All right, you're just about done. Yay. There are going to be 5 things you will return to the depot that you have chosen. That is going to be your black kit, your e-poll books case, your boxes of number 3 voted ballots, your number 6 boxes of blank ballots, and your chief supply return form. And you might go, what's this little form? This is a chain of custody form. You are delivering us ballots and equipment and supplies, and we need to know you're providing this and we're receiving that. So it's a way to track that, stuff isn't getting lost. So please fill this out. If you are at the Fairfax County Government Center and this form is not completed, they may ask you to kind of pull off to the side and finish this form. Your rover has been supporting you throughout the day. They don't go home until all the precincts on their route go home. So do them a favor by texting or calling them just before you leave the precinct to let them know that you are dark, as we say. And that way they know that you are on your way to the depot. If we don't see a precinct filling out their SOR helper, if we don't see them reporting dark, we may think that you're having some trouble closing and we'll be giving you a call to say, hey, how can we help you get out the door and get home faster? Now we're going to turn this back over to Sean for final reminders and for the administration of the oath.
Thanks, Gene. So we've gone for over an hour here. Like I said, we're shooting for an hour and a half to 2 hours, depending on our questions. I know we've gotten several. So we'll turn to Q&A as soon as we finish up here. I just want to remind you about the Chiefs Open House next Tuesday. Go ahead and sign up for that to let us know if you plan on coming. That's going to be next Tuesday, 2 weeks before the election. You can pick up your Chiefs notebook early if you want to. And if you don't, we'll put it in your black kit for you. We'll pack it there for you. Additionally, there's still some workshops to sign up for available in the election officer portal. If you're interested, those are optional, but highly encouraged. And finally, remember everything that we talked about this election. It's a bit of an atypical election, specifically for the contest on the ballot. but in general, we expect some decently high turnout. So be sure to remind your election officers about what conduct is and isn't allowed as a nonpartisan election officer. For now, though, I'm going. For now, though, I'm going to go ahead and administer the oath to you, so that in turn on election day, you can administer the oath to your election officers. So if you would please hold up your right hand and repeat along with me here. I do solemnly swear that I will perform the duties of this election according to law and the best of my ability, and that I will studiously endeavor to prevent fraud, deceit, and abuse in conducting this election. Congratulations, you're now sworn in as a chief or an assistant chief election officer. And like I mentioned, on election morning, you'll do the same in turn for your election officers. After this briefing, and after we're done here today, we'll send you a confirmation email with a short quiz to take to confirm that you attended, so you can receive credit for watching this briefing. We'll send that out later today, and that's going to be due by Sunday, this coming Sunday, April 5th. Go ahead and take care of that as quick as you can, just so that we have that confirmation. No reason to delay. In a second here, we'll turn to our Q&A. If there's any other question you have that you haven't asked yet, we've been collecting them throughout this presentation and answering them. Go ahead and get that in using the Q&A feature in Zoom. And if we can't get to your question, or if we don't get to it today, or you think of it later, you're always welcome to reach out to us at electionofficers@fairfaxcounty.gov or give us a call. We're happy to help. Before we get to Q&A, I'm going to turn it on over to some other staff to talk about what the turnout has been so far. And then we have a lot of office staff who are here and waiting and here to answer your questions and ready to provide their expertise on any given situation. Before we move on to that, though, I just want to conclude with a little bit of a personal update for myself. Use this opportunity to mention that this April election will actually be my last election with Fairfax County. I've been working in elections for almost 10 years, and the majority of that time has been with Fairfax County. And while I've only been in my role as election manager for a short while, I've been here for several years, and I've been incredibly gratified to see all the improvements we've been able to make, but more so, all of our election officers and you as chief and assistant chiefs, your dedication to the process and to helping out all of our voters in voting. And I think it's really impressive to see, and I really appreciate everyone's service for the voting process, because that's what it's all about, right? It's all about making it a good experience for the voter, and for us in the office, it's making it a good experience for you as our election officers, so that you can translate that in turn out in our precincts. I'll be moving to another state in May, and so I want to thank you if I've met you in person, or if I haven't. In any case, or if I'll see you next week at the open house, I just want to thank you for serving as an election officer, because it's really great what we do here. So thanks for letting me share that bit of personal news. I will move on to our Q&A here. Like I said, we have a lot of managers here who are ready to answer questions. Eric, did you have something you want to say?
I just want to say for the group, and I'm sure everybody in the office will join me, and also all the election officers, all the chiefs, that you are a consummate professional. The way people carry themselves every day is so important, and you carry yourself quite well. And the way you're conducting yourself this last month, I can't say how much I appreciate it. You're a fantastic colleague. You're a fantastic person. And I wish you all the best in your future. I think you're going to do extremely well.
Thank you so much, Eric. I really appreciate that. And I can tell you from experience working here that all the dedicated professionals we have here in our office are more than capable of continuing the mission of secure, accurate, transparent, accessible, and successful elections. So everyone's in good hands, and I wish you the best of luck on election day. I'll be here. And then for the other elections we have coming up this year in August and November and there beyond. Before we jump into our Q&A, I want to turn it on over to Flo, our early voting manager, to give us an update on how early voting has been going. I mentioned that it's been pretty steady. Can you give us some more insight on that?
Thanks, Sean. Good morning, everybody. Welcome, and thanks for joining us here on this briefing. Greetings from the early voting team, myself and Bill Turley, the assistant manager. So I'm happy to report that turnout has been very high at the 3 locations that are currently open. As of Monday evening, just under 25,000 people have voted early in person for the April special election. Government Center is leading the way with more than 13,000 people having cast a ballot here at the Government Center. So we're not done yet. On Saturday, April 11th, 13 additional locations will open across the county. On Saturdays, our hours are 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And on weekdays, our hours are 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. at all locations other than the Fairfax County Government Center. The Fairfax County Government Center is open 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. on weekdays, excuse me. Early voting ends on Saturday, April 18th at 5 p.m. and there's no Sunday voting this cycle. So there's still plenty of time for you to vote early in person, especially if you're not assigned to your home precinct. So please come and see us. We'll be happy to take care of you and get your ballot cast. Back to you, Sean.
Thanks, Flo, and thanks for mentioning the upcoming dates and deadlines. I want to check with Ben, our absentee by mail manager, to let us know how vote by mail has been going for this election. I understand it's been pretty high, right?
It has been. We are tracking above the presidential at the moment for returned absentee ballots by about 200 and change. I think it's 198 to be exact. Um, we're tracking overall between us and early voting pretty even with the gubernatorial last year, so this is looking to be quite a big one. We already have 50% of our expected ballots back. We mailed 75,000, give or take, and we've got approximately 35,000 back. So we're doing pretty well there. But be on the lookout in your precincts. This has been a much higher turnout absentee race than we expected, and you may have significant drop box ballots on election day. And my typical reminder stands. We've had, I don't know, it's at this point a gazillion elections in short order. So make sure when someone's coming to bring their ballot to exchange that you're checking that ballot and making sure that that ballot is for the correct election when they exchange it. That's pretty much all I have. If you have any questions or anything, you're welcome to ask me or ask anyone else, and they can help you out.
Thanks, Ben. And if I want to vote by mail before Election Day, when is the deadline for me to request a ballot?
April 10th.
Thank you. That's, of course, I already have my by mail ballot, but that's for the benefit of the group. So if you want to vote by mail, be sure to put in that application. Thanks, Ben. Thanks, Flo. Appreciate those updates. We're going to move now into our Q&A. So we'll jump into questions that we've been collecting either before the briefing or during the briefing. I'm going to turn it on over to Gene and Steve, who will make sure that we go through those.
Great. Thanks, Sean. Bushra, I've got a couple of questions for you to kick us off. The first one is, are citizens who will be 18 by Election Day in November 2026 allowed to vote normally in this election?
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you for your hard work on election day. Yes, that's correct. Anybody will be 18 by November 3rd, 2026 are eligible to vote on every special election, primary, and general election.
Thank you. And the second question is, can federal elections only voters vote in this special election?
So federal only voter could vote in this election only if they return permanently, and they must complete SDR.
Okay, thank you. My next question is for Justin. Justin, whose phone number should go on the curbside sign? The chief, the assistant chief, or both of them?
Thank you, Steve. So on the curbside signs, we print both. Let me unblur my video because I do have a past example. All right. So on the precinct curbside signs that we print, they do have the chief and the assistant chief phone numbers. The reason that we do that is so whichever one will be better to be used is y'all can put that side on the front. Please do not scratch out the backup number. That is for our office. Main reason that we do that is in case that you forgot to turn off spam filtering, any issue with your phone calls, if your phone is not accessible, we will start going down the phone tree that we have for y'all and contact anybody who we can at the precinct until we are able to reach somebody to let y'all know there is a curbside voter out front. The voter does not have that option if y'all only have 2 phone numbers out there. So please do not change the backup number that is on there. Just use whichever side is most appropriate, either the chief or the assistant chief phone number.
Thank you, Justin. Sean Rogers, I've got a few questions for you. First one is on the voter referral worksheet. Who should start the voter referral worksheet and when? Can the check-in officer start it?
That's a good question. We always want to give you procedures that are going to work out best for you and your precinct. We found from experience that a lot of check-in officers know to refer voters they can't check in normally to their chief, but they may not know which situation applies. So best practice is to start that at the chief's table, either the chief or the assistant chief, because it's just going to more streamline the process, have a form bouncing around between fewer hands. Because not necessarily every chief call is going to start this worksheet, because again, it's a worksheet to help you with non-routine voters that are often likely to end up being provisional ballots.
Thank you. And another question on the voter referral worksheet. Do we need to fill it out, the voter referral worksheet, for absentee voters who surrender their ballot to vote normally?
Great question. So like I said, we want to set you guys up for success and not have you do repetitive busy work. So that is not a provisional ballot, and the decision on those are pretty easy, right? If a voter has their ballot to surrender, their absentee ballot that they've requested, that they bring into surrender, all they do is turn it into you. You put it in envelope number 4, and you have them start with a ballot that they can vote on machine. You'll follow the what if for what to do with that ballot and what to write on it. And that's what the voter referral worksheet will direct you to. So you can make sure that you're following the procedure correctly. But the voter referral worksheet, it says itself on that worksheet that after your first one of the day, it's not necessary to continue that worksheet for an absentee surrendered, because the only thing you're checking there is that they surrendered, and that's just not super helpful for that process. So for any other absentee situation, let's say they're marked as being issued an absentee ballot and they don't have it, you want to continue with that worksheet, but for the simple absentee surrender, just the first one, and then you're good to go if you're confident from there.
Missed it. Sean, can a voter vote anywhere, or must they vote in their home precinct?
Great question, easy answer, but with a little bit of nuance, right? So voters should vote in their registered precinct if their registration is up to date. That's going to be their home precinct. This is all on election day. For early voting, a voter can vote at any of our satellite locations, like Flo just described, until they close right before the election. On election day, voters should vote in their registered precinct. Now, if a voter is not registered and they need to do a same-day registration, that precinct is going to be the precinct where they live. That's where they're going to do their SDR. So if I live in, say, precinct 849, I should go to precinct 849 to do my SDR and not a different precinct. The same thing applies if you've moved from one precinct to another and your registration is out of date. If you're going to be doing an SDR, that's in that new precinct that you moved to. The asterisk that I'll mention related to all of this is for voters who moved out of a precinct within a certain time frame. These are what we call the moving conditions. Those voters may have an additional option to vote in their, quote, old precinct. You want to be very careful with this and make sure that you're conscientiously evaluating the moving conditions for voters whose addresses have updated to make sure that you can help them vote where they're standing, if they're eligible to vote in your precinct, or if they're not, that we can get them to the correct precinct. So easy answer, but kind of a long answer for those exception cases. If you have any issues with voters who have moved, give us a call. We're happy to walk you through it. Or there's also some handy charts in the Chief's notebook to help you kind of evaluate these situations. And again, if a voter is just not registered, that's pretty easy. They're going to do an SDR in the precinct where they live.
Great. Thank you, Sean. One last question. Can scanners and ballot marking devices be taken out of the cage at setup and put in place as long as they're kept locked overnight?
That's a good question. The answer is no. You're going to want to leave your voting equipment in your cage and set it up election morning, making sure that it's been locked in that cage overnight and there are no chain of custody concerns. It's definitely been in the cage, all of your equipment, before you need it on election morning. What you can do is stage the room for where you're gonna put these pieces of equipment. So, if you want to tape out a location with your scanner with the sort of 4 foot distance that you want election officers to stay away from on the floor, you can do that during your Monday setup and get your table set up where you're going to put the ballot marking device and the EPBs, the e-poll books, but you want to leave those until election morning. Generally speaking, when you do set up on Monday the 20th, you'll get everything but the equipment set up. You can put up all of your indoor signs, maybe not your outdoor ones because you want to do those election morning so people don't get confused. To leave just everything that you need to do in the hour before you set up to just be machines swearing officers in and sort of those things that you can't do in advance.
Thank you, Sean. Gene, I'm going to turn it over to you for more questions.
Thanks, Steve. All right, we're going to go over to Beth, our polling place liaison and expert on all such things. Beth, are all the precincts in Fairfax County going to be in their usual location from November, or are there some changes?
Yes, all of the polling places for the upcoming special on April 21st will be using the voting rooms that they used in November. The one exception is the Culmore Community Library, which is completely closed to the public for renovation. That precinct, Holmes, has been relocated to Bailey's Elementary School. So that is the only change for April 21st. There will be a large sign posted at the library instructing voters in Holmes Precinct that they will be voting at Bailey's Elementary School. They have also received a notice informing them that their polling place has changed to the Bailey's Elementary School.
Great, thank you. We've got a question about, will there be tables and chairs delivered to the schools who tend to have those attached chairs, those little tiny tables that we know are so dangerous for voters?
Right, that is true. And I want to stress that the tables with the attached chairs do not meet ADA standards. There is really no exception. I know some locations are like, well, gosh, we've used these for all the elections, we've had no issues. That still doesn't justify the use of them. So the requirement is that appropriate size tables with separate adult size chairs must be provided. The schools are well aware of this, and I have received maybe 25 requests or messages from the schools that they have requested tables or chairs or both for this election. So the schools are well aware of this requirement. Also, just a brief mention that the Rovers will be conducting an ADA survey. This is the Chiefs, y'all don't have to worry about this. This is done by the Rovers. But one of the questions will be, did the facility provide appropriately sized tables and chairs? So I just want you to know that's going to happen at this upcoming election. That's a little bit of a long answer, but we really want to try to get to where no location, no schools are using this type of setup for voters.
And I just want to stress, Beth, that's because voters have been injured on these on this type of furniture. It's unfortunate, but it trips people, and it's just not something that we can deem as safe for voters. So it is very important.
That's exactly right. Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, we really hate when we have to call 911 and people are bleeding. It's bad. We're going to move this over to Tyrone for a question if he is available. And the question for Tyrone is, where are the depots for this election? A number of our chiefs have been working specials and we've had some changes, but what does the landscape for that look like this time?
Certainly. Thank you, Gene, for the question. The depots will be in full effect. We will use all 4 locations. North County will be one. Marshall High School will be one. The loading dock here at the Government Center will be one. And Mount Vernon will be one. All will be open and available. You'll be able to pick up your equipment on Monday, and you'll be able to return it on Tuesday night.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Now I've got 3 questions for Arash, and then we'll wrap it up with Sean Stewart after that. And for Arash, what sort of things should chiefs be putting, and assistant chiefs maybe, in their chief's notes? Sometimes people are a little uncertain on that.
Sure, yeah. This is a great topic to kind of go over. So first things first, chief notes, you're going to be able to find them in the rubber banded packet wrap in your black rolling kit. And that's also going to be something that you're going to be returning an envelope to. That is going to have a couple different sections in it that should be explanatory, but there's an observation and comments section. There's a section in there that has to do with election day incident reporting, as well as like voting equipment problems. As I said during my section, if it's something that you're calling the office about, it's going to have to either be a voter related issue, a general support issue, or a equipment issue. That should be something that you're putting in your chief notes, even if it's just a quick little blurb that you called at this time about this question. Um, there are instances where you may have a voter, especially with certain topics, that may want to fill out a complaint form or something like that. Please log that in your chief notes as well. We will be getting those little comment forms, but we also would like to see that reflected in your chief notes. If there is a voter that abandons a ballot that needs to be voided, that is something you all should be writing down in your chief notes. This is all in, I believe, chapter 5 of your chief notebook. Also, whenever you have authorized reps or media visitors or anyone coming in, please also note that in your chief notes as well. Um, Discrepancies found in voter count worksheet, things like that. It's all going to be able to be found in one place, and we have a lot of chief notes returning empty. Some of them even don't have the chief and assistant chief's names on the front, and we would like to see less of because that is really a nice reflection of what your day has been like. And even though during Canvas we get a nice big picture of what your day was like, we like being able to look in one place for a nice summary.
Thanks for that. Um, is the Chief's Notebook available for pickup anytime other than at the open house on Tuesday, April the 7th? And what if you
Uh,
can't go? How do you get your notebook that otherwise?
Sure, that's a very common question. Similar to other elections, the open house is the main time that we've offered that to be picked up as a early opportunity to get the physical chief notebook. However, Gene, correct me if I'm wrong, but the chief notebook will be made, if not already, but will be made available digitally on the portal. And the benefit of that is it is searchable. So if you just hit Control F, you can always just search for certain keywords. Like if you type in chief notes, you can see all the times that it tells you to use things to be in your chief notes. That's accessible to everyone. The other time, besides the open house, will be on Monday, April 20th, during your supply pickup. And it will be in your black rolling kit. So those are the 2 times right now that we have available for that.
Great. And a last one for you. Is there any guidance on how we can train our election officers to avoid saying more than they should about the proposed constitutional amendment?
Sure. I've seen this question come up in the Q&A, and I think some of my other um peers have kind of done a great job of answering that. So I'll kind of just summarize what they've all been saying. Um, this election is about whether or not the General Assembly can proceed with a mid-decade redistricting. As officers, we cannot comment on or provide any explanation on the wording that is supplied by the General Assembly. If people have an issue with that, they are welcome to contact their state delegate and senator. The brochures that we're providing, that are also provided by the state, um, essentially help to describe a little bit more about what this constitutional amendment would allow to have happen. Um, we are not voting on the proposed districts. So it may be tempting to answer questions about the question or what this may lead to. But please coach your team that, the scope of this election is whether the General Assembly can proceed with a mid-decade redistricting. If they want to express any other feelings or if they have any other more specific questions, they're welcome to research it. Everyone has a phone on them these days. They can step aside for a second and go online, but also you're welcome to direct them to one or both of the tables outside of your polling place if they need to talk to one of the party members as well. They may be able to be more partisan with their answers, but our goal is to be nonpartisan. So please make sure everyone is keeping their opinions and feelings about this at the door.
And Arash, if I could just offer kind of the way I tend to think about this is that you have a very long day, 13 to 15 hours in a precinct, but a voter, their voting experience is just going to be 2 to 5 minutes. So we really have to be vigilant about the things we say in a polling place because it's liable to, if we express bias or really any unsavory opinions, it's liable to ruin someone's voting experience. And I think that's something we should all take very seriously. So remind your election officers that it's um, uh, issues like this aren't things we can opine on in the precinct. Outside of the precinct or in your personal life, sure. But thanks, Rosh, for providing that kind of context.
Sure.
Appreciate all that, everybody. I'm going to circle back to Beth for just a moment. We've got a question about whether the school point of contacts will be in. There's a concern about it being spring break. I'm not sure when Fairfax County spring break actually is.
Thanks, Jean. Spring break is this week for Fairfax County Public Schools. It also includes Monday. So school will be back in session on Tuesday next week. The point of contacts, therefore, shouldn't be assumed that they'll be reachable this week. However, I have sent several emails and have gotten a response. So I just wanted to put it out there for them so that when they come back on Tuesday, they could respond to my questions. So I've received answers from about half. So I would imagine if you call the number, they probably wouldn't answer. You can leave a voicemail or you can email your contact and just to say, hey, when you get back to school, I would like to set up a time. So that's my best advice for that.
Thanks, Beth. And finally, Sean Stewart, we have a couple of hot potatoes for you, which I know you have the oven mitts ready to handle these.
Fantastic layup, Jean. Well done.
I try. We've received several questions from people who are concerned about the presence or the possibility of the presence of ICE or similar federal agents showing up at a polling place. Of course, we think this is highly unlikely, but people are concerned, have a little anxiety about it. What can we give them as guidance?
Yeah, Gene, we've certainly seen some interest on it, right, coming in through the chat, and it's understandable, right? We have fantastic people working for us that are listening to us today, and they're informed, educated folks like our voters are, and they pay attention to what's going on in the world. Here's the important thing to remember. Folks, when you're out there working on election day, right, you have a primary focus and a primary concern. And you've heard it today from Eric, you've heard it from Sean, you've heard it from Arash, you've heard it from Jean. I could keep on going, but you've heard it from the team altogether. And that's because it is the true focus and the purpose, which is to administer this election to the best of your ability to make sure that Fairfax County voters have the opportunity to cast a ballot, which is their right. What that says for this specific instance is that the law and the guidance that you have in the fantastically provided Chief's Notebook, the statutes themselves, they limit and they prescribe who's supposed to be in a polling place, right? A polling place is for voters. We have some additional persons that can be authorized, an authorized representative, perhaps a neutral party if we have somebody coming in to observe, members of the media, right? Other folks don't have a role in the polling place. So what does that mean for you? It means you should conduct your actions and that of your staff, direct your staff to the best of your ability to maintain an orderly and efficient polling place for voters to cast those ballots. If you have somebody that is in the polling place for any reason outside of those that are allowed by law, you have an obligation to interact with them, try to explain the situation, provide guidance that they're welcome to cast a ballot if this is their precinct, or cast a provisional ballot, whatever the needs may be. But if they're there for any other purpose, then they need to exit the polling place. All right. And the good news is that because you're the professionals you are, many times that will handle the situation. You have two options beyond that. If you need additional guidance or the person may need some other information for some reason they can't seem to get the clarification from you as the chief or the assistant chief, please reach out to our office. That 324-4735 number is a catch-all for any support you may need. If you find yourself in a situation, if you've heard several times today, and as you've seen in your notebook, in a situation where there's a medical emergency, where there's a threat to life safety or any other issue right? Your first step is to call for law enforcement and dial 911 to get the help that you may need to address the situation. You'd always want to follow up with us, but those are the two avenues. And the good news, folks, is that that information applies to any situation in the polling place that moves beyond the specific guidance that we have. Any concerns of any specific action that you've seen in the news or anything coming from the political sphere that we all are a part of, but that we try to separate ourselves from on election day. So know that there's support in place. The office is there, and certainly county services, whether it be medical or otherwise, can be available through 911. So follow your standard procedure. Act in the way that we know you all do because you're here getting the training. You've done it before. Forge ahead, and you're going to be where you need to be. Gene, what else you got?
All right, last question, unless is there a preferred answer that we could give a voter who asks about the legal challenges to the redistricting effort that have happened or are underway?
Yep, another big one. Certainly, folks are interested. They know things have been going on. Arash and Sean have provided you some great information on that. Folks, we really want to direct voters' attentions to the explainer brochure or information that's otherwise posted. And here's why, right? The source of the constitutional amendment is the General Assembly. The General Assembly came up with the language, and the General Assembly had the obligation and responsibility to provide the explanation information. That pamphlet is their voice to voters, right? They have literally approved it, and that's why it's out, printed, provided by the Department of Elections. That's where you're going to want to direct them to. I know that can feel, many of us are really interested in making sure that voter, as Sean said, for that really short window, we have them in front of us, have the information they need, but that brochure is the way to do it. If they move beyond that, right, there certainly is information out there. People who have seen information on litigation all the way up to the Virginia Supreme Court. You're welcome to respond to say, the Supreme Court has ruled that the election shall continue. That's what we're doing. Any other litigation or information is beyond our purview, and we don't have anything to share on that. So help them with the information they need to vote, or let them know that they should take the opportunity to research it and come back during the day to get that ballot cast. Beyond that, let them know you're there to help with the process, but can provide any other information on the ballot question itself.
Got it. All right. Thanks so much. And we'll go back to Sean Rogers to close us out.
Thanks, Gene. And again, thank you everyone for joining us this morning today. Like we talked about earlier, there's going to be a quiz link sent out to you later this afternoon. We'll also post a lot of the Q&A that we've gone through today in the election officer portal that hasn't been updated yet. So give that a week or so we can make sure we've taken all the questions we've gotten here and make it available to everyone. But mostly, thank you for joining us, and thank you for serving in this election on April 21st. We really appreciate you and what you're willing to do for our voters here in Fairfax County. Want to wish you luck on Election Day, and if you have any issues on Election Day or in the meantime, give us a call or send us an email. We're here to help. Thanks. Have a good rest of your day.